Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be starting in a couple minutes. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second session of our data-powered webinar series. So my name is Kailash, and together with my colleagues, Ismail and Adisa, we will be facilitating today's session. Our goal through the data-powered series here is to really highlight real-world examples of how companies right here in the Caribbean are leveraging their data beyond the traditional static reports to drive productivity and improve their decision-making process. We hope that through these presentations, it will spark ideas on how you and your organization can leverage your data to bring your business up to speed in 2022 and beyond. So without further ado, I would like to hand you over to today's speaker, Mr. Richard Mano, a former tower manager of BP, for his presentation. But just before I hand over, if you have any questions during the session, please type them in the chat and we will be sure to bring it to his attention at the end of the presentation. So Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Kailash. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending. We'll get straight into it. Are you guys seeing my screen okay?
Yes, we see your screen.
Okay. All right, so quick introduction. Seeing a couple familiar names. So I've been around the industry for quite some time, and I do have couple events under my belt. So, the intent here is to really carry you through the process of how we identified the problem and exactly how we went about using intelligent applications to come up with a solution. So I'll start with just getting you familiar with the overall view of the entire TAP process, and then we'll speak a bit about specifically what we were trying to solve and how we used some of the tools that the company was already paying for in terms of the Microsoft suite, and just where technology is right now in terms of having Wi-Fi at a lot of our facilities in Trinidad, and just sort of leveraging some of the infrastructure that is existing. And then we'll get into some of the results that we were able to achieve, and then I'll give you a key tip on what I think is sort of essential piece of knowledge, a perspective that you must consider once you seek to use tools in this space. And then we'll have some time for some questions to respond to some questions from chat. So I'll start with a classic definition of a TAR. So one word here that I'll be very, very careful, I think that folks need to be careful about, is the definition of cannot. Because with non-intrusive, where technology is right now in terms of non-intrusive methods, in terms of isolation tools, in terms of temporary equipment, there's actually a lot that can be done that was not previously possible in terms of going after work while the asset might be operating. So be a little careful about who is telling you cannot. So a lot of times you might be able to actually filter down some of your requirements, some of what you would classically think is task scope, kind of filter it out, solve it in another way. So this graphic is intended to sort of give you a holistic view of the overall TAR process. I'll just quickly take you through it. Typically for any particular facility, plant, you're going to have a particular premise in terms of what the plant was designed for. Some of the newer facilities, you are going to actually find, if you look for the documentation, you are going to find a task strategy. And this will outline what the designers intended in terms of production uptime and how often you would need to take the facility down for end of cycle event, be it your API 510 inspections, etc., etc. You are going to be able to find something. Some of the older facilities, you're going to have to kind of scrub through a lot of documentation to actually piece it together. Of course, there's always end of life issues, obsolescence issues with kit. So that's going to come into the space in terms of projects. Typically, your projects are going to fall within risk avoidance in terms of safety or production enhancement and things like that. So, of course, your company probably has a system, some maintenance management system, where you can go and you can find all of this information. You could actually pull the data. Yeah, I'm just kidding. That system probably just has a whole bunch of generic stuff in it that probably not going to be all that useful. You still need to pull it, but chances are you really need to reach out to the operators, to all the engineers, to everyone involved running the facility, to really pull the scope out, and then you take it through a process of technical and commercial evaluations. Understand what value, the value add of any particular item, get into your funding approval. Key pieces around freezing your scope, and I'll elaborate a little bit about freezing. You want to freeze your scope, but you also don't want to entirely shut the door, because as you start to go through this process, you are going to start to get late entries. Light bulbs are going to go off. People are going to bring in things a bit late, and you need to make a decision on whether or not you put that scope into this event, or if it can wait for a future event, or if you're going to do it in either the pre-TAR work or the post-TAR. You need to figure out, because it's either you're trying to just deliver a turnaround for a specific set of objectives, or you're really committed to giving that assurance that the plant will make the next full cycle, that you will accomplish everything that you need to do in order for the plant to operate problem-free for, let's say, the next 10 years or so. So, you get into your detailed planning. A key part of the detailed planning is your construction norms. So, once you get your engineering completed and you start developing your detailed plans, You're going to start to get into your construction norms and understanding durations and what constraints you may have at a particular facility. So when I talk about constraints, I'm talking about limitations. If you're talking about an offshore facility, you're talking about choppers, vessels, personnel on board, POB. And once you start getting that level of detail, you're able to produce a resource-loaded schedule for your frozen scope. You get into execution, reporting, data collection. Now there's a key piece in terms of where we started to identify what we wanted to solve. So in the lessons learned sessions from prior events, we were getting a lot of feedback that we had field supervisors using Excel sheets, preparing reports at the end of the day, and it was taking them a considerable amount of time to populate all of those sheets and then pass it on. So the data wasn't coming in real time. It was coming in at the end of the shift, and it was also taking a considerable amount of hours after the shift to populate. And you would have a lot of things happening during the day where folks would be keep calling your construction guys to find out things, to find out information. So it was really disruptive in that sense. And when we started to dig into the lessons learned and we started to get that feedback, one of the things that started to pop out was that we had construction norms where we did the same exact work on a prior tar, and let's say we're talking about changing a 6-inch class 600 valve, and you would have a specific amount of man hours associated with various crafts. And when you looked at the data that we were getting back, you realize that the data wasn't converging. We were using, in some cases, the same contractors. A lot of things were constant, but we weren't seeing that ability for us to predict, to get better at predicting the exact duration on these things. So remember, we're talking about getting these things down to hours and minutes and thing when you're looking at a particular turnaround. And of course, there were also some issues in terms of the planned sequence of the turnaround, how it was laid out, was not discreetly followed. It was not followed in an appropriate fashion. So you would end up, our guys would get on a site, and there would be significant changes that disrupted the entire plan. So I tried to kind of show, that if you look at the graphic there, that if you are spending, you should be spending at least twice as much time reviewing your turnaround as your team, as the time you spent planning it. So the planning team, if your turnaround was 2 weeks, you should be spending at least 4 weeks really sitting, the entire team really going through the lessons learned and really extracting as much information from the previous event to inform the future event. So you need to be committed to the process of continuous improvement and getting better in that space. So in the previous slides here, we're talking about on the left-hand side of the slide, you have a more strategic view of some elements of the whole TAR process. But what our focus was on is actually more on the tactical side of execution. So from the resource-loaded schedule, we really wanted to get better data in terms of being able to have appropriate norms and productivity data in terms of breaks, wrench time, time spent, delays due to choppers or any other simultaneous operation, things like that. There was a real need to get data in a manner that was more accurate than how it was done before, in terms of trying to figure it out at the end of a shift. I mean, I'm sure guys had notebooks and things like that, and they were recording it, but we were seeing from the lessons learned that wasn't, the accuracy of that data wasn't quite there. And we also knew how much like during the execution of a turnaround, how many calls were going out to the facility and being almost disruptive to the flow, distracting the guys from the execution of the work. So this is where we started to brainstorm about what was available. So there was a lot of these intrinsically safe devices, Wi-Fi. There was the ability to, so just sort of thinking through with the team, we just started to try to figure out how we could actually get better at this and what was available. So I think a key piece here is, the motivation of the team for that continuous improvement to take it to the next step. So we went out to the market and we landed with intelligent applications, and we started to describe exactly what we wanted to solve and worked with them to come up with an app that was able to really keep the turnaround on the track, give us that real-time reporting, so that we wouldn't have that need to be constantly trying to get information. So the information flowed directly from field supervisors. Would now have a tablet in their hand. They would have a very simple interface on that tablet, an app with a very simple interface that allowed them to timestamp the turnaround schedule as it was intended to be executed. So, for if anyone at any point in time made a change to what the plan was, we didn't create a whole lot of noise in terms of challenging who might be in control of the platform at the particular time in terms of the OIM or anything like that. It would automatically show up in the app that we are going off course, and we would know that immediately on the beach. Through, I mean, once there was Wi-Fi, but if there wasn't Wi-Fi, the guys would just have to walk the tablet back to the accommodations and upload and do an upload. So, it was a way of us getting that information continuously, and it also helps the field supervisor prompt them in terms of what activities should be starting and stop, what activities they should be focusing on, the sequence of the activities. So it helps to keep the train on the tracks, so to speak, while executing. So essentially, your final schedule, your resource loaded schedule is populated into the app. The app allows you to timestamp. You can have physical verification of completion of scope by taking some of the photos and things like that. So that really helped with some of the management reports and things like that, or because we would have daily reports during the turnaround, and then we would have a weekly report. So it really helped to that communication piece. It also gave the guys a device in the field that they could communicate. They could pull up drawings, they could access any particular network storage of information for data, whether it be work packs, if they needed prompts with any particular safety conversation, any things like that, they had access. They had a tablet in their hands. All right. A really critical piece of deploying any particular app or technology is really understanding how people are impacted by it. So in our case, you really need to think about, you need to think of the pros and the cons. I think sometimes we look at these things in silos and we really don't understand how it might be affecting people negatively. So in this particular case, think about your field supervisor in the previous model where they were using the Excel sheets. It was a credible use of man hours at the end of the shift to consume, let's say, 4 additional hours. So you went from a 12-hour shift and you were paid for additional 4 hours, so you get 16 hours. And now what we are proposing here is an app where we're saying you don't need to do this at the end of the shift. You're going to just do the timestamps and the reports are automatically generated. So you don't need to spend a huge amount of time after your shift. You can focus on the handover to the crew that's coming on and things like that. So, when we actually started to kind of think about how, we really wanted everyone to really support this implementation. So one of the things that we sort of came up with is that, it is reasonable, given the value that we're adding here, to increase the standard pay hours to a 14-hour shift. And then you also be very clear in terms of what the benefits are in terms of safety, in terms of not distracting the crew from completing their work, so that your field supervisors during the day are not taking 10 calls from the beach. And some of those calls, I could tell you, they were frustrating to the guys offshore, right? Because, it's like the beach calling them, 10 different people from the beach calling them for information at times. So, for the same information. So, you give them the space so that they will deliver safely for you. So, no one is going to argue against improving the whole fatigue management in that space, because on quite a lot of turnarounds, one of the strategies that you deploy is a safety incentive, a safety bonus. And everyone is always committed to ensuring that you complete the event safely. So what I'd say, a next aspect of understanding how the humans are impacted here is really thinking about the implementation of technology in a way that it frees up your resources to do more meaningful work or to take on more. So, don't think about how you're going to reduce costs and get rid of people. You should be actually looking at this as a growth opportunity and how you utilize your resources now to do something that's more meaningful, more useful, So it's a much better use of a field supervisor's time to focus on the actual activities than sitting after his shift and trying to fill out Excel sheets. I think we could all agree with that. Right, so I promised to leave some time for questions. So let's hear you all.
If you have any questions for the team, you can either type it out on the chat, or you can just raise your hand and we'll give you allow you to ask the question directly. So Richard, while we're waiting for some questions, one consideration here is that we know that what was the reception to the project? Because we know, like you say, management often have to give a lot of consideration of how the technology needs to be used, and not about just getting rid of people, but trying to free up their time to do the more meaningful work. But on the other, how did you perceive like the reception? Were people open to the use of technologies? Did you all have to sort of push that a little bit more? What was that interaction like?
Well, as I mentioned, I mean, I was sort of fortunate that, the team was really really supportive of this whole drive towards excellence in terms of continuous improvement. I mean, so, we went in the task phase there, and, our events we had quite a lot of successes. And as the industry started to sort of contract, and, there was a sort of decline in revenues, and that put a lot of pressure. You had a lot of pressures from management to sort of reduce costs and things like that. So, your team size started to shrink. A lot of things started to reduce, and we needed to find ways to keep our edge, to keep our excellence. So, when we started to have those conversations at the time, I mean, the natural thing before we actually went to the market locally, we first went to some of the EPC providers that were the incumbents for the particular contracts, and we asked them, because we said, I'm sure this exists already. Can you deploy it at this location? And it was cost prohibitive. I mean, it just wasn't making sense for what we thought was reasonable. Hence we approached the local market, because I think there's this misconception that you need to spend quite a lot of money to accomplish some of these things. But the truth is, I think what you really need to do is, once you get your team sort of lined up and engaged on these things, these guys were quite supportive of helping to help build the app in terms of defining how it would have worked, was useful, was not useful, so we had a couple key players on the team that were really committed to seeing this through, and we got a lot of support from the guys in the field in terms of using it. Now, I got to see how it worked in terms of really good outcomes in terms of reporting and sharing the Power BI, the live dashboards with management, and they were completely blown away by that real-time data, and them being able to not wait on a call at any particular time. I mean, for me, it was really good, because at any point in time, you could check in on the progress that the guys are making, and if you need to call, if you see something going off track, and you need to just call the team to emergency meeting to solve something, you had information to respond. You had credible information, reliable information to respond and mitigate, and get things back on track. So the last time I did where we used that app was 2019, and I could speak to how that whole information share and Power BI dashboards, that was very successful. Now, in terms of the data that we collected during that, a lot of that data is what informed the subsequent tasks in terms of the norms that we used to plan the durations for the 2020 events. But I left, 2020, 2021 events, but I left at the end of just a year ago. So I mean, the guys, there are probably guys on the call here who could probably, you know, tell us whether or not they hit the mark, they hit the target in terms of planned duration and actual duration, and if the norms, you know, if there was better norms coming into the planning of those last events.
All right, thanks. Again, would anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question or contribute to discussion, please feel free to raise your hand. All right, so as we're nearing the end of the webinar right now, so Richard, just lastly, and I know this might be a very difficult question, but could you put an estimate on like how much would have been saved or gained by using the app?
That is, I would say, that's very difficult to estimate. But what I can tell you, because the scale of events, of various events are so different. I mean, you know, one of the things that we had to prove before we actually got approval for the funding to spend the money on the app was that we could demonstrate that it would pay for itself, and that it did very well. I mean, we actually paid for all the devices. We paid for everything that was associated with implementation in one event. So, you know, when you think about that you build a system, it pays back for itself in the first event, and then everything beyond that now is just icing, right? Is just a benefit. And when you start talking about some of these large events, I mean, you have events that, you know, the total spend may be $2 million US, and you know that could go all the way up in the brownfield space. You know, you could probably go up to as much as about 50 million US, and you think about just if you get like a 5% saving on your overall cost, execution cost, and it can be quite significant.
Okay, thank you very much. So before we wrap up, again, any more questions from the field? I see somebody's typing. Rena, would you like to ask the question? Oh, so yes, we have one question, right? Using the app impacted on additional man-hours usage. She's still typing. Oh, hold on. Rena, I'm going to allow your mic so you can ask the question directly. You just have to unmute.
Afternoon, guys. No, it was just a comment and using the app that from Intelligent Application for in terms of the man hours that we would have utilized. Using the app would have decreased that part, that number.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, well, again, thank you, Richard, for your presentation today, and thank you everyone for attending. Next week, we continue our series next week with Terence Pancho from De Novo Energy, and he will give us their journey through digital transformation. So look forward for that next week. We look forward to seeing you all again next week. And once again, thank you, Richard, for your wonderful lecture today.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending again. Appreciate it.